Well, good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to this webinar, which we've called The Church in a Digital Culture. If we've not met before, my name's Will Triffett. I am the Digital Engagement Officer at the Diocese of Salisbury, part of the communications team. And I have, the joy of serving in comms and digital things across our area. It's really good to have you with us. We've got our time together to really focus on digital and what does that look like now? We know it's a really relevant topic. We know it's a big topic. There's lots of input in the wider world around this. I just really wanted to spend a bit of time diving a little bit deeper into that and helping us to think it through for ourselves and what it might mean in our context. Before we do that, because it wouldn't be a church thing without notices, just a couple of little plugs. Firstly, we are looking at doing a webinar on Affinity, which some of you may have heard of. It is an app, a software, which is for design. It's owned by Canva. If you've heard of or used Canva before, you may know a little bit about it. But with publisher finishing in the autumn, we want to offer something a little bit different. So on the 23rd of June, Tuesday at 10 a.m., a guy called Dave Pickett, who is it's kind of my role in St Albans, has kindly offered to come and do some training for us. If that is something which would be relevant to you, we'll send out a link after this. Secondly, this webinar is part of the Create Network, a network for people across our diocese with a heart to use creators' gifts and skills to serve and grow the local church. So if that is something which would be interesting to you to come and be a part of, drop me an email. I will pop my email address in the chat in a moment. And finally, a date for your diary, the 12th of September, a Saturday. Keep it free because we are going to be doing a digital day conference in Salisbury, where we are going to unpack some more of what we've talked about here and other things, AI and digital mission and ministry. So if that is something that would be of interest to you, keep your eyes open and we'll see where we go. Okay, I'm going to hand over to Dan. Dan, you can introduce yourself. And Dan is part of the Create Network. He is a vicar down in Bournemouth. You are all in this circle, way more than I am. So, Dan, off you go.
Cheers, Will. Yeah. Hi, everyone. Really good to be with you this afternoon. So, as Will said, I am a vicar in Kinson, which is right by Bournemouth Airport. So ignore the background noise. There's not much I can do about the planes, unfortunately. And I am essentially a professional mega nerd. So we've gone with a kind of shotgun approach today. We're going to cover a few bits and pieces because actually, the church is part of digital culture, whether we want to be or not. And so we're talking about being playful. We're talking about hopefully breaking down some barriers, giving us just some ways of thinking about why and how we are being called into these places and spaces, about the people that have gone before us and God is already working through, and also just a little look at some different ways in which people around the world are encountering the stories of God's people. And so I wanted to start off by just asking us a simple question, which is, when you got up this morning, what was the first bit of technology which you used? And immediately, I think sometimes our minds go to our phones, but did we roll over and turn off an alarm clock or flick on our bedside light? Did we put our feet into our socks? Because if you're sleeping in socks, I am judging you straight away, by the way. Because these things are technological, right? This is technology, but we so often don't think of it that way. And I think one of the things we often forget is technological is books. I don't know about you guys, but I'll quite often reach for my Bible fairly early in the morning, normally straight after I've turned on my coffee machine, which is also technology and also essential. But the book is a really modern thing of technology, and we're weirdly a lot less afraid of books than we are of digital tech. There's going to be memes throughout this because otherwise I lose my train of thought. So you're welcome to have my attention span and flick through as you go. So we've got some quotes on the right here. The multitude is a distraction. It feeds habits of improper indulgence. It nourishes a vain and visionary indolence. It opens the mind to error and the heart to seduction, which sounds like how the Daily Mail described Facebook. But the very first headline there is Seneca in the 1st century. And Seneca is really worried about the danger of libraries, which are obviously going to ruin our attention span and wreck our ability to learn. The second quote is about a very, very dangerous piece of technology called the novel. And so often, don't we read now that we need to encourage people to be reading novels because they're good for us and books are great. Interestingly, this quote referred to a real fear for women and children, that if they were to get involved in these books, they might have all these kind of fanciful, creative ideas and not be able to work in the factories anymore. And future shock is this quite kind of normal thing that we all have when we encounter something new and scary that we don't quite understand, that we don't quite know what to do with. And I think the place we most see this at the moment in our headlines and our discussions is around this idea of an attention span, because we all know social media is ruining it, don't we? And this is where I want to invite us to start to get creative and playful when we're in these discussions, actually ask ourselves, well, what is God doing in these places and spaces? What is God doing through the gifts of technology he gives us? Because an attention span is actually quite a new thing. So the first time it seems to be kind of really glorified and built up was industrialization. And obviously, if you're asking children to stand on an assembly line for 5 or 6 hours and make shoes, an attention span is a really important thing. You don't want them being distracted. That'll cost you profit. There's some really interesting conversations around that, though, because prior to the printing press in the 15th century, reading was really uncommon. And even those that could read, they would scan through a book to find a kind of clever quote. And that would be the bit that they would take. They wouldn't worry about the whole context and the content. That's why we ended up with these big indexes in books, so that those people who read that way, they could just flick through, find the interesting stuff, the stuff that grabbed them. And we live now in an attention economy, right? Where lots of things are grabbing and asking for our attention. And so in neuropsychology and in philosophy, we've started asking this question of deep attention versus hyperattention. When I went through school, we didn't have smartphones or anything yet. And so it was really important that I knew stuff. I have an incredible knowledge of the build-up of the Weimar Republic before World War II. I have never used that knowledge in my entire life, bar a GCSE history paper 25 years ago. And actually, if I wanted to know about it now, I've got all of it right here, right? I don't need to know facts and figures. What we need is an ability to assimilate loads and loads and loads of different bits of information very quickly, to evaluate and integrate new ideas and theories, and to use that to move forward, to ask ourselves big questions of who we are and what we know. And so already you can see where we end up in kind of theological discussions of what does it actually mean to be human? Who are we? Is an attention span part of who we are? Is that what the image of God meant all along? It was never logic or creativity. It turns out it's how long we can read the written word. It's not, by the way, please don't take that seriously. And so I want to give us a bit of a worked example about how we can think things through a little bit differently. And I find one of the areas that often gets maligned in all of these conversations is video games, right? And so on the screen here is a video game called Cyberpunk 2077. I don't know if you've come across it. So Cyberpunk 2077 was one of the biggest video games ever. sold about 30 million copies. And in that game, you come across this guy called Joshua Stevenson. We can see him here on the screen. Joshua was convicted of murder. He murdered someone who worked in a corner shop. And when he goes to jail, the victim's sister sends a letter to Joshua saying not only that she forgives him, but that Jesus loves him. And in this game of cyborgs and giant gleaming skyscrapers, Joshua becomes a Christian. And in this world of cyberpunk, there's this technology called brain dance. And brain dance is really cool. You can put a helmet on and you experience everything. It's like the ultimate movie. You can feel the feelings, you can feel the physical sensations. It's like you're there. And so Joshua is going to be executed for the murder he committed. And Joshua says, well, I want to be crucified so that anyone can experience what Jesus went through. And so you start this mission. When you start the mission, you sit in the game and Joshua asks you to pray with him. And you, as the player character, you can sit down and you get some choice. And it says, well, do you want to pray the Lord's Prayer? Do you want to pray the Amidah, which is an ancient Jewish prayer? Do you want to pray the Rigveda? Or do you want to pray in your own way, which is kind of a standard evangelical free prayer? There's a little video here just to show you.
I am so afraid. Will you pray with me? A prayer of your choice.
Fine. Sure.
And so you pray with Joshua.
I am so afraid.
Oh, you don't do it twice. And then you get another option. You can choose to watch the crucifixion. You can choose to be in the crowd. You can choose to walk away. Or you can be asked if you would be willing to nail the nails into the cross yourself. If you, as the player character, wander around the room, you'll find that Joshua has been reading Ecclesiastes 9. And as the player, you too can sit in this room and read the Bible with him.
This is it. My time has come. I want you to walk with me. I'd like you to wield the hammer. Nail me to the cross. Please.
30 million people were asked if they would be willing to drive the nail into the arm of the man upon the cross. We're doing digital theology, whether we're willing to engage with this or not. This video is the final scene. I'm going to just give up a warning. There is a violent content here. You see the nails being driven in and the man himself is in kind of skinny loincloth. The video is about 2.5 minutes long. So if you'd like to mute, turn off your video, do whatever you need to do to be comfortable watching this.
Do you not fear God? You stand condemned under the same sentence.
Father, forgive them, for they know not what they do.
We are punished justly, for we receive what our deeds deserve. But this man has done no wrong. Remember me when you come into your kingdom.
Truly, I say to you, today you will be with me in paradise. Father, Father, into thy hands I commit my spirit.
So I wonder, I'm a vicar, but I haven't used this in a sermon or spoken about this as a teaching method for the congregation. And yet, there's a very high chance a large portion of the people that we're speaking with have experienced this moment, have been part of this story, have told this narrative. This is a place where people are going and hearing these stories. And so the church, I think, has an opportunity to be part of that conversation or not. But whether we are or not, the conversation is happening. It's frozen a little bit. And so, as I said, I think there's some big questions that this allows us to think about. Now, first is, what is technology? When we're talking about the church in digital culture, actually, what do we mean? What does it mean for the church to be technologically engaged? So I think we can think of tools, of technology, as something quite practical sometimes. We think maybe of a hammer, right? Or maybe we think of a nail. But actually, if we think about some of the transformations that have been worked throughout humanity, fire is a technology, right? A force. See, technology is any way in which we are given agency to interact with the world around us. Technology is what allows us to be creative. It transforms human agency and possibility. And we are made in the image of a creator, God. To be a little bit more controversial, maybe I can say we are made in the image of a technological God. Because human beings are tool makers, we are world shapers, we create culture. And tool making isn't part of a fall from grace. When we are cast from the garden, we are given clothes to wear to keep us warm and tools to tend the earth. We are given the skill to make arks, tiny ones to keep Moses safe as he goes down the river, and large ones to keep God's people and creation safe from a flood. We are given the tools to steward creation, as God has called us to do. We are to till and keep the world. But actually, one of the incredible ways we have of interacting the world is through our speech. And so is our speech technology? Is it a thing that gives us agency and allows us to interact and extend and shape and mediate? And if speech is technology, then God's first act in Scripture is technological. God speaks and the world changes. But it's not that simple, is it? It's not, I think, as simplistic as saying, okay, we can go and do whatever we want because all tools are good. We have Babel fairly early in Scripture to remind us of what happens when we try to become God. Marshall McLuhan, who's famous for saying that the medium is the message. He says, well, look, we shape tools, and from then on, the tools shape us. Or perhaps we say more colloquially sometimes, don't we? If we've got a hammer, everything starts to look like a nail. Actually, the tools that we have, the tools that we choose to use and the tools that we don't, they form our habits. They change our attention and our imagination, often without us noticing. This isn't an intentional thing. The Amish, who are often much maligned, they have a rule, which is not that they will not use technology. Actually, the Amish have this question when they adopt any technology of, is this going to be good for our community? So we think of them as perhaps Luddites and non-technological users, but actually, for a really good example is smartphones. And often Amish communities will have smartphones, but they will be kept in a drawer in the house to be used only when necessary or helpful. That theological question, actually, what kind of person does this technology want me to become? What is God doing through this? And as we ask that question of the church in culture, we begin to realize the place of the church in this question, of questioning how we use technology, how we speak about it, how we adopt it, how we recognize that actually the technologies that are around us are shaping us. And I suspect, or I worry, my great fear is we think we can choose not to be part of this conversation. We can opt out of social media. We can step away from a smartphone and we can think, well, that's okay. This doesn't affect me. It doesn't bother me. I'm not part of this. But we all live in digital spaces. The Bible Society have just done a really interesting report, which they've called Digital Nations, where they've looked at video streaming as a nation where people are existing and doing things differently, where they have their own language and culture, where they look at Reddit and forums in a similar way. Digital spaces have their geographies, their neighbours, their customs, liturgies of scroll. How often have you heard people talk about the God of the algorithm, of likes and notifications asking for our attention? But actually that online and offline has effectively collapsed. There's a philosopher called Floridi who says that now we live an on-life existence. If you want a taxi, you order an Uber. If you want food to your door, you get a Deliveroo. And you might think, well, I don't. I go to the shops. But we use our phone to pay. And those around us are doing the same. That boundary between online and offline has dissolved. I think the place I see this quite often, I'll talk to a lot of people who will tell me they're not on social media and then will send me a WhatsApp. Now, how many of our churches have got WhatsApp groups that are hanging around? How many of us are part of that WhatsApp group that a friend added us to that we're not quite sure who else is in it? How many of our churches have WhatsApp groups with people who haven't come through the doors but consider themselves part of the community, part of the church? How often are we thinking of how they're engaging, how they're hearing the stories of God? And so we have these kind of three challenges, these three questions, these three thoughts. And the first is attention, because it all wants our attention. It is attention that pays the bills. We can't shy away from that. But actually, we can train that. There's an amazing theologian called Kate Ott, and she talks about digital hacking. She points out that when we're in these spaces, actually, we can tell the algorithms what to give their attention to. And if a sea of Christians go onto social media and they start liking amazing content that lifts up Jesus, do you know what? The algorithm changes. If we put ourselves in more diverse communities, if we place ourselves online in places that make us uncomfortable, confront us with people that we otherwise wouldn't meet, we're going to see the image of God more clearly in each other. These are affordances that this offers to us. For me, I always come back to the letter to the Colossians. And Paul in Colossians, he writes this bit. He says, I have not seen you face to face. He's basically saying, I've never met you in person. In that same letter, he says, I suffer for you. And actually, Paul unites this with the idea of the church. He says, look, we're bound together in this. We've never been physically present, but in this letter I send to you, we are in conversation, and my suffering is for you through the universal church. And so if Paul can do that in the letter to the Colossians, I think we've got a bit of an image of how we can start to engage with Zoom and with WhatsApp and with YouTube and with forums and with the communities where we find ourselves. And so it has to land practically, because I'm not a proper theologian. I'm terrible at patristics. And so if I land it practically, I'm a lot more comfortable. And I thought during COVID, we had some moments of this, didn't we? And in the Church of England, it all came out about communion. Blooming heck. Little cups and big cups and bread and wine. And is the Zoom Eucharist? Can we do communion online? But actually, it's a really good question to ask. Because what does it mean to be present with people who can't be physically present with us? What does it mean to care for people who might not engage in the way that we're comfortable with them engaging, but find themselves able to engage in these new ways? What does it mean to accept that actually, if Paul was united in suffering with the people of Colossae through the medium of a letter, can we be united in Christ's suffering through the medium of a Zoom room? Because it's tempting to give simple answers, isn't it? You've got to have bread and wine. You can't do bread and wine on Zoom, so no. But isn't the bread and wine always an avatar? Isn't it always virtual? The bread and wine doesn't become the body and blood, right? And so what does it matter if physical presence is the problem? Is it a distance thing? In which case we can do it in parish churches, but cathedrals might be a problem because they're like 150 metres long. How far does the grace of God extend from the table? There's this opportunity to be creative in these spaces, to ask ourselves these problems. And I think actually it comes down to that same response that we see so often in Scripture to the presence of God coming amongst his people, where those first words are, do not be afraid. Because God is in this space, and if this is a space and a place, God is at work in it. Through the medium of Cyberpunk 2077, through those community WhatsApps that we've got, through ChatGPT. This is a PowerPoint that I've used elsewhere. So there is a random side here, but I've left it in and I want to go over it quickly because this is somewhere where I encounter people being very afraid quite often. And this is how an LLM works. Now, look, we all know that LLMs are lay licensed ministers in the Diocese of Salisbury. I'm very sorry. It turns out that in the great copyright battle between the Diocese of Salisbury and Google, Google will probably win. So we're going to use LLM. Here, we're going to refer to it because it is a large language model. And all these new AIs that we're using, they are brilliant mathematical guessing machines. So the way an LLM works is we feed it a load of data. And the example is always cats and dogs. We show it a load of pictures of dogs and we say, these are dogs. And we show it a load of pictures of cats and we say, these are not dogs. And then after we've shown it 100,000 pictures of cats and dogs, we can say to the AI, this is a picture of a carrot. Is this a cat or a dog? Now, what the AI does is it looks for patterns. And we as humans do this, don't we? When we recognize faces or things, when we think, is it a cat or a dog? We might ask, does it have whiskers? Does it have long fur? The AI will ask similar things in a mathematical way. It will say, what is the likelihood of the pattern of this picture being a cat or a dog? And it will give you an answer. And it does the same with text. So LLMs have been fed billions and billions of words. And so when we say to ChatGPT or to Gemini or to Claude or whatever, write me a story, it goes, oh, I know what a story is. I've got a mathematical model of a story. And it says, okay, well, we're going to begin with once. And then the next most likely word mathematically after once is once upon. And so it begins to build up a story in the most mathematically likely way. And it does this for any question which we ask it. But the problem is, of course, if you've trained an AI on 100,000 pictures of cats and dogs, and then you ask it, can you tell me the primary themes of the Gospel of John? That LLM is going to say the Gospel of John is not a cat. This is not a useful response. So what we have now is what are called agents. And what the LLMs do now is they have lots of different AIs. And there might be an AI that has been trained on a load of travel data. And there might be an AI that is really, really good at checking calendars. And so each of these has a particular skill. It might be making videos or generating images. And now when you ask one of these AIs what to do, it goes out and it finds all the others and it says, okay, I need you to generate this image. I need you to check it. And then I need you to create the text that goes with it. And here's the example on the screen. Actually, you ask it to find the best day out for a Saturday. It will go and understand, look up in the right places. It checks and improves upon itself. You've got these monitors now that check all this, and then it returns the best answer. So the really exciting thing about this is that it will always hallucinate. It will make mistakes. It is mathematically impossible that it won't. AI in its current form will not be perfect. And it also will not become sentient. LLMs are not what is called artificial general intelligence. They are not AGI. Because they have these restrictions, because they are required to have learning sets, because they make mistakes, while we are in a world where we are likely to give these things more responsibility than they should, because we are flawed and broken, a lot of those fears are very far away. And actually that empowers us to continue to look at some of the real big questions, which are around disenfranchisement, which are around whose voices aren't being heard, which are around what training data has been ignored, whose information or creativity has been stolen and used for gain. And the great news is that's got to be a place the church has got a voice, right? Because that seems to be what Jesus spent a lot of time shouting at people about. We have answers to these questions. And not only that, we have worth and value in these debates and conversations. We don't need to be caught up in the future shock, in the fear of the technology. Actually, if we can believe and know that this is a space and place, then the mission of God is at work. And we can have confidence that the mission of God is not reliant on us, but that we can speak into what God wants for those places. And so we've got some examples here where we've got these kind of gifts or costs of using some of this stuff. We've started using it for our PCC minutes, which I know sounds really small, but blooming heck as a vicar does it take a lot of time. And so we just listen to it and the AI creates the PCC minutes. And we've got a prompt that then says, can you also give us a 1-page summary for the notice board? It's a game changer. And it's not taking away a particular act of creativity. If we had someone on the PCC who went, actually, this is a way I serve and I want to be part of that, that would be a conversation that we would have to have. We use it to respond to emails. And this is really helpful, but gosh, is it dangerous, right? Because it's really good for emailing back to, I don't know, my car insurance to say, is there any chance you could not put my quote up £100 for no reason? It's really good for dealing with the administrative kind of, this is the rota or this is where you can find that. But if someone emails you needing pastoral advice or theological instruction or has a question about the Bible or what God is up to in their lives, what place then do we want AI to have in responding? Look, one of the hard things is generating enough content. And actually, AI can help us to create copy for social media. It can help us to create newsletters and devotionals. But again, the question is, what place is the Holy Spirit in the activity that we're taking there? What side do we want AI to sit on? Where is our interaction with the work of God in our lives that flows into the communities we're part of? And I've included training. Google I/O was today, and I don't know if you guys have seen, but some of the stuff Google have put out looks unbelievable. They've now got a video prompt engine that means that you can say to it, can I have a training video for X? And you can upload a video of your church and it will create an animated video. It gives us the ability to create the tools that we might need. But actually, there's some real costs. it is a statistical model, which means when we're asking it to be creative, it gives us the most likely next response. Isn't it nice when something's surprising? I don't know about you, I've got 2 kids, and when they used to come home and say we've been doing poems at school and they would show me their poem, it was a collection of words that no human being before or since has ever put together in that order. And it didn't make sense. And it was certainly not wonderful literature, but it meant a huge amount. AI can randomly put words together, but that intention, that meaning, where is that in that flattening? The responses are biased. I was part of a research paper a couple of weeks ago, and there's more and more of this coming out, again, because what we've asked it to read and understand was decided by big tech companies. What we thought the model needed to know was decided by big tech companies. What we think the models need to do is decided by big tech companies. Actually, as is so often the history of the world, in that learning data, minorities are often overlooked. And at the moment, there is a huge amount of human interaction in these models, in correcting them during the training phase. And again, that's often contracted out to third world labour. What is the damage of using these tools that are hurting other people? And there is a lack of personal connection, right? It's really easy to say to ChatGPT, can you write a pastoral text? It's really hard to go and sit with someone who's in pain. And there might be times that pastoral text is exactly what they need. And there might be times where just sitting there is really important. Presence matters. And so as we sort of come towards the end of our time together, I think really there are those 2 things. I want to say to begin with that response of do not be afraid. These are places and spaces where God is at work, and God will always prepare the called, right? That's something I got told a lot during discernment, and I really hope other people get told, because otherwise I was clearly just rubbish. But actually, these skills and gifts that we think we need before we go into these spaces, God is at work in these spaces, and we are called to go and witness that. It's Missio Dei. And if the mission of God is in that space and we get to witness to that, then that's quite an exciting thing. And often, I don't know about you, but I find God will prepare us once we are willing to walk into those spaces. So digital tools are not broadcast. This is not some newfangled thing that we need to be afraid of that allows us to push the sermon further. It is a missiological invitation to be present in a place where billions of our neighbours already live and are being discipled and are hearing the stories of God's people. And there's some amazing stuff going on. We were talking the other week about during COVID, the first Sunday of COVID, YouTube crashed because so many churches went online. The Bible Project. I don't know if you guys have come across this, but it's incredible, not just because it means I don't have to write the introduction for confirmation courses, but because actually this is incredible biblical scholarship made accessible and easy to view. And their introduction to the Gospel of Mark has got 4.1 million views. On the top right there, we've got PST Iron, who is on Instagram, and he posts up these beautiful reels of what's been going on in his worship services. And people interact and share them and talk through them. He has a community online who interacts with his worship services who have never been there. The bottom left, we've got Craig Brown. He's a YouTuber, a social media personality who shares Bible devotionals each day. 47 million people interacted with Craig Brown last year. This is not about numbers, because numbers can be abstracted, can't they? But this is about people. It's about recognizing that actually this is where people are existing and integrating and asking questions. The bottom right is a subreddit called r/Christian, where people go and say, God feels really far from me at the moment. Where people go and say, how do I deal with this ethical challenge? Or how do I deal with loving my neighbour? And they receive hundreds of Christian voices back, reminding them that they're loved, that Jesus is part of their life, and offering support. People are living in these spaces and places. We cannot choose not to engage. So thinking theologically about this digital stuff is not a niche thing. It's not something where only young people are involved in. This is a missiological invitation. It's asking us to be aware of the world that we inhabit, to be part of talking into culture about what God is doing. We don't have a choice whether or not we engage with digital technology. We are engaging every single day. It is where our congregation live. It is where our neighbours are. The question is whether we want to do it thoughtfully or whether we want to just exist in it by default. Do we want to be like Paul and be saying to those that we have not met that through the glory of the universal church, we too suffer for our neighbours? All right, I'm going to end my screen share.
And thank you. Thank you. Yeah, so much to ponder on there. And thank you for how you pulled that together. I asked Dan about doing this Tuesday last week. And yeah, it's been a really helpful time just to think about where we are. If you have any questions, feel free to pop them in the chat, and we can ask them. Dan, one that is in there is about, could you give some more advice about automating taking of minutes and sort of some of the capabilities around that?
On mute. One of the great joys is digital reminds us how vulnerable we are, because 6 years into it, 3 years of a COVID pandemic, and I still forget to unmute myself. So it's been a real game changer for us. We're still working through it, but very practically, if you can get a recording, then there are loads of AI tools out there that are good at this. I think the thing I would suggest to most of us, if you are part of a church, is you get charities licensing, which gives you access to a thing called Copilot. And if someone wants to message me, drop me an email, I'll make sure my email's in the chat. And we can explain that because it gives you the paid access for a lot cheaper. But actually, I think go and play with these tools because you can talk to them as though it's a conversation. So ChatGPT is really accessible and easy to get onto. Stick it into Google, jump onto ChatGPT, create an account, and you're away. The process of automating minutes is then as simple as uploading the audio and saying, can you produce minutes for a PCC of an Anglican church? Something just to be aware of all these things is it's a lot like real life conversation. You get out of it as specific as you put in. So there's a technique called prompt engineering that you might want to Google and ask some questions about. But actually, the main thing is just remembering if you say to it, we are a small Church of England church in XYZ, and this is the minutes of our PCC meeting. Can you please create a detailed minutes of the meeting and a one-page notice sheet? It will do what you tell it to. You can also have some fun with it. Ask it to create an abstract image based on the minutes. Ask it to create a brainstorm of the things that were going on. We did a retreat day last year, and we uploaded the kind of notes and prayers and things that we'd had. And we asked it to generate some images off the back of that. And those were really cool, and just cool to see the kind of abstract stuff that was coming out of some of that. So for minutes, get a recording, record it as a voice memo on your phone or as a note, jump onto ChatGPT, upload the audio, and just say to it, can you create these minutes? But the easiest access to AI for charities at the moment is to go and look at Copilot, because you get paid access for very, very cheap as a charity.
Wonderful. Thank you, Dan. There's nothing else coming in. I see a question about recordings. Yes, they will be up on our YouTube channel. We're also going to put it out on our podcast channel. So search The Diocese of Salisbury, wherever you get your podcasts, and you'll be able to find it there as well as a backlog of some really interesting conversations. So yeah, we're going to leave it there. If you have any other questions, do feel free to drop me an email. I will email out a couple of dates after this, as well as links to recordings when they're on. Dan's just put his email in the chat. As well. So, yes, do get in touch with myself or Dan. If you have any questions, feel free to watch it back, share it with other people who may find it interesting, and look out for dates and all that kind of thing. But thank you so much for joining us. Hope you have a wonderful rest of your day and a great rest of your week.